Imagine getting laid off. You get that, that really vague calendar invite from HR for Friday afternoon, and your stomach just drops.
Oh, yeah. Nobody wants that meeting. It's the worst.
Right. But maybe, just maybe,
Yeah.
you think there's a silver lining because you've been at the company for a while.
Start crunching the numbers in your head.
Exactly. You realize you're entitled to a decent financial safety net.
A redundancy payout.
Which is huge.
It is. It's
Yeah.
enough to keep the lights on, pay the mortgage, buy you some breathing room while you figure out your next move.
So you take a deep breath, prepare to transition out.
Yeah. But then the final paperwork arrives. You scan down to the bottom line, and you find out your redundancy payout has been slashed.
Ouch.
And I don't mean just reduced by a few taxes. I mean slashed to absolute zero.
It's a devastating scenario to find yourself in. And unfortunately, it's entirely legally possible.
Which is wild to think about. It really is. I mean, we tend to view employment contracts and workplace rights as these solid, immovable shields. Like, we think, I work the years, I get the payout.
Right. This feels like a guarantee.
Exactly. But the reality of employment law is much more precarious. It operates on these mechanisms most of us never see until it's just too late.
And that invisible machinery is exactly what we are pulling apart today. Welcome to the deep dive. We are exploring the hidden tripwires of employment law, specifically surrounding redundancy and workplace rights.
A really critical topic for anyone working today.
Definitely. And to do this, we're looking at a recent batch of case studies and service guides published by the Australian Workplace Discrimination Representatives, or AWDR, published on June 23, 2026.
What's fascinating here is how these AWDR cases highlight the mundane reality of workplace disputes.
How do you mean?
Well, when we think about employment tribunals, our minds immediately go to the cinematic stuff, the explosive office arguments, blatant harassment, dramatic walkouts.
Right, the stuff that makes the news.
Exactly. But so often, massive, life-altering financial decisions don't hinge on bad behavior at all. They hinge on highly technical contract details you signed like 5 years ago.
All right.
Or, honestly, just a matter of hours on a clock. It's really a game of absolute precision.
That is terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
But whether you are a manager trying to do things right or an employee wanting to protect your livelihood, you need to know how these rules actually play out in the real world.
You really do.
Because the gap between what you and I think is fair and what the law says is technically correct is massive.
Yeah, and to understand why that gap exists, we have to look at who is actually navigating it on the ground.
Right.
The AWDR provides a really clear window into this landscape. I mean, they've been operating for over 30 years, dealing with everyday Australians, and they've handled over 16,000 clients.
16,000. That is a lot of workplace friction.
That volume alone tells you how much friction exists in the modern workplace. It's staggering.
Okay, let's unpack this baseline before we get into the wild specific cases. Because there's a crucial distinction in our source material.
Yeah, there is.
These representatives handling all these thousands of cases, they aren't lawyers. They're workplace relations specialists.
That's right.
So if the stakes are this high, with thousands of dollars on the line, why are people using non-lawyer specialists?
Well, because the system is designed, in theory anyway, to be accessible. But in practice, it requires a very specific type of translation.
Translation of the law.
Yeah, I mean, the average worker doesn't speak the language of the Fair Work Act. They just know they're being mistreated or financially penalized.
Makes sense. They just know they're getting a raw deal.
Right. So the job of a specialist is to take that messy human experience of a workplace conflict and map it onto a very rigid, procedural, legal framework.
I see.
If you don't know the framework, you'll trip at the starting line.
Let's look at that concrete for everyone listening. The source material lists a huge variety of issues these specialists handle. Toxic workplaces, serious misconduct, sexual harassment, non-genuine redundancy.
It's a long list.
It is. But it seems like a lot of these categories, like toxic workplace versus workplace bullying, could overlap. How does an employee even know which rule they are fighting under?
They do overlap in human experience, for sure. But legally, they are completely different animals.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Take the difference between unfair dismissal and a general protections dispute. Most people think, well, I was fired unfairly, so I'll file for unfair dismissal.
That sounds perfectly logical to me.
It does. But under the Fair Work Act, unfair dismissal simply means your firing was harsh, unjust, or unreasonable. It's mostly about procedure.
Like, did they give you warnings, that kind of thing?
Exactly. Did they have a valid reason regarding your performance? Did they follow the right steps?
Okay, so what's a general protections dispute then? How is that different?
General protections are about your fundamental workplace rights. It's not just that the firing was harsh, it's that you were fired specifically because you exercised a protected right.
Oh, like a retaliation thing.
Right. For example, you asked for your legally mandated overtime pay or you joined a union.
Or took sick leave.
Yeah, took sick leave, and the company fired you in retaliation for that specific action.
Wow. Okay, so if you get fired for asking about unpaid overtime and you file an unfair dismissal claim instead of a general protections claim, what happens?
Your case could be severely compromised or even thrown out entirely.
Just because you picked the wrong category?
Yes, because you're arguing the wrong part of the law. You'd be arguing that the procedure was too harsh, while the company would just say, no, we laid them off due to performance.
And you completely miss the chance to enact the actual retaliation.
Exactly. Which carries much heavier penalties for the employer, by the way. That's the machinery at work. Getting the initial classification wrong ruins a legitimate claim.
Which means knowing your rights in a vague, conceptual way just isn't enough. You have to know the mechanics.
You really do.
And sometimes it's the fine print of a standard contract that catches you completely off guard. Which leads us to our first case study from the AWDR files.
This is a wild one.
It went to the Fair Work Commission in Queensland, involving Alliance Airlines, and it was finalized in mid-2026.
Yeah, this case is an absolute masterclass in how a seemingly minor contractual dispute can just vaporize a financial safety net.
So we've got a worker named Brett Morley. He joins Alliance Airlines in June 2024. Now, Alliance runs charter flights, heavy in the mining sector.
Right.
Before Morley even joined the company, he had developed a command development training program. This was his own project.
Built on his own time.
Exactly. And importantly, some elements of it were sourced externally, meaning he didn't even own all of the intellectual property himself. He brought this knowledge with him into his new job.
Which is very common. You know, we all bring our past experience and personal frameworks to new roles.
Sure, we don't start as blank slates.
Right. And he even informally raised this program with Alliance during 2025, suggesting they use it, but the company never formally adopted it.
Fast forward to November 2025. Alliance undergoes a restructure. Morley is told his current role is at risk of redundancy.
Which is always stressful.
Yeah, but the company does what they're supposed to do. They look for redeployment options to keep him employed.
They don't just kick him to the curb.
Right. They offer him a new role as a flight training manager. On the surface, it's a perfect match. Same pay, aligned duties, utilizes his exact skill set.
And on paper, the commission looks at that and sees the textbook definition of acceptable alternative employment. The company is actively trying to save his job and maintain his income.
But here's the catch. To take the new role, Morley has to sign a new employment contract.
Right.
He looks at the draft, he signs the position description, but he pauses at the intellectual property clause.
He reads the fine print.
Yes. He tells HR, look, I want my pre-existing command development program expressly excluded from this new contract. He wanted to guarantee that the company wouldn't claim ownership over his past work.
And from a human perspective, that is a completely rational request.
Totally.
I mean, he built it before he worked there, and it contains third-party elements he legally cannot sign away to Alliance anyway. He's just trying to protect himself from future liability.
So he pushes back. But Alliance refuses to change it. Actually, they amend the contract with different wording that actually makes it worse.
Oh, corporate legal departments.
Yeah. They require him to grant the company a perpetual, irrevocable, royalty-free license to use, modify, and exploit his IP.
Wow.
And they insist this is just their standard provision. Morley says no. He tells them he can't warrant rights over material he doesn't fully own.
Which makes sense.
He doesn't explicitly resign, but he absolutely refuses to accept that specific IP clause.
And this is where the machinery of the law takes over, devoid of any human emotion. On February 4th, 2026, Alliance Airlines treats his non-acceptance of the contract as a total refusal of the redundancy redeployment offer.
Wow. Just like that.
Just like that. They issue a redundancy letter, but then they apply to the Fair Work Commission to have his redundancy pay, which was 4 weeks' worth of salary, reduced to zero.
Reduced to zero. And the commission agreed with the company. They actually cut his payout to zero. This feels incredibly unfair. He's protecting his own property.
Yeah.
How does the commission justify taking away his redundancy pay?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger legal picture, we have to look at the doctrine of the status quo.
Okay, what is that?
The commission didn't rule on whether the IP clause itself was deeply ethical or fair. They looked at objective continuity.
Continuity of the job.
Continuity of his contract.
Mhm.
They found that the IP clause in the new contract for the new role was completely identical to the IP clause in the original contract Morley had already signed back in June 2024.
Wait, I think I see where this is going. It's like moving into a new apartment.
Right, but it's an apartment in the exact same building you currently live in. They hand you the new lease.
And you refuse to sign the new lease because you suddenly realize you hate the building's pet policy, even though you've lived under that exact same pet policy for 2 years without complaining.
That's the perfect way to look at it. The landlord is going to say, well, this isn't a new rule. You can't claim this new apartment is fundamentally unsuitable based on a condition you've already accepted.
Why?
Yeah, the commission explicitly stated that the new job offer maintained the status quo. The location, the pay, the skills were aligned, and that controversial IP clause was a pre-existing condition of his employment.
So because the alternative job was deemed legally acceptable and essentially identical in its terms, his refusal meant he forfeited his right to a payout.
Exactly.
The law doesn't care about his sudden realization of legal risk regarding his own IP. It only cares that the employer offered a continuation of the established baseline.
Precisely. I mean, the Fair Work Act requires employers to offer suitable alternative employment to avoid paying redundancy. Alliance proved they did exactly that.
Even with the IP issue.
Right. Morley's refusal, while personally justified, was legally categorized as a rejection of a suitable role.
It's a brutal lesson.
No.
We often skim employment contracts when we get hired because we're just excited to get the job.
Though everyone does it.
But those standard provisions are tripwires waiting to go off years down the line.
And it highlights a critical point. You cannot unilaterally rewrite the foundational terms of your employment during a redundancy restructure and then expect the Fair Work Commission to back you up if you reject a comparable role.
Okay, so Brett Morley lost his financial safety net because of rigid rule working against him.
Yes.
But that rigidity swings both ways. Our next case from the AWDR files shows a worker who won her payout because the strict mechanics of the law caught the employer slipping up.
Oh, this one is great. We are moving from the trap of fine print to the absolute trap of strict deadlines.
This is the case of Calapac D versus BIC Services, heard in the Industrial Court in New South Wales. We have Malene Halpakdi, a part-time cleaner working in the Sydney CBD.
Okay.
On November 12, 2024, the cleaning company tells her that the specific contract for the site she cleans is ending. They let her know that if they can't find alternative work for her, her last day of employment will be December 15th.
Listeners, notice the precision of the dates here. It's really vital. November 12th is the formal notice. December 15th is the locked-in termination date.
She works her final rostered shift a couple of days early, on December 13th. On December 15th, she has paid out her accrued entitlements. Her holiday pay, her standard wages, but she receives no redundancy pay.
And here's the twist.
Right. The very next day, December 16th, at exactly 3:27 p.m., she receives an offer from BIC Services for alternative cleaning work in the Sydney CBD.
The very next afternoon.
Yes, it's the same hours. She just has to start and finish 30 minutes earlier.
Let's pause and look at that offer objectively. Just like the Alliance Airlines case, this is a very reasonable alternative role. It definitely meets the criteria for suitable employment.
But she refuses. She tells the company, hey, you sent this after my employment ended. I've already made other arrangements. I want my redundancy pay.
Good for her, but they fought back.
Well, yeah, BIC Services fight back hard. They argue that she was technically still employed, or at the very least, the redundancy pay should be zero because they did exactly what the law asks. They offered her a perfectly acceptable alternative job.
Which is the exact same defense that worked for Alliance Airlines. They're saying, we offered a comparable job, therefore we mitigated the redundancy, therefore we don't owe the payout.
But the outcome is totally different. In April 2026, the industrial court ruled in her favor and awarded her $4,304.37.
Wow.
That's 6 weeks' pay plus interest. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. I have to play devil's advocate.
Okay, go for it.
That seems insanely bureaucratic. The company actually found her a job. They missed the deadline by literally less than 24 hours. We are talking about an afternoon email.
Yeah.
3:27 p.m.
Isn't the spirit of the law to keep people employed, not to punish a manager for sending an email at 3 p.m. instead of 9 a.m.?
Well, if we were dealing in vibes and general fairness, you'd have a strong point.
Right.
But the law isn't about vibes. It's about the mechanics of severance. The industrial court ruled that the December 16th offer was entirely immaterial.
Immaterial because of the date.
Exactly. Because her legal relationship with the company officially died at midnight on December 15th.
The Cinderella deadline.
That's exactly what it is. I mean, the company's own official payslip recorded December 15th as her termination date. Once that date passed without an alternative offer being made, her employment was legally severed.
So the email is just too late.
When BIC Services sent that email at 3:27 p.m. on the 16th, they weren't redeploying a current employee. Under the eyes of the law, they were trying to hire a total stranger who used to work for them. That is wild.
Oh.
So the fact that it was only 15 hours late doesn't matter. She's a free agent.
She's a free agent, and because her job was genuinely no longer required by the client, it was a genuine redundancy.
Right.
By failing to pay out the redundancy money on the 15th, the employer didn't just make an administrative oopsie. They actively breached Section 44 of the Fair Work Act.
Let's define that for a second. What is Section 44 doing mechanically?
So Section 44 deals with the national employment standards. These are the bedrock rules of Australian employment. You literally cannot contract out of them.
Okay, they're set in stone.
Yes. They mandate that if a role is made redundant, the severance pay must be provided upon termination. The company didn't pay it, thinking they could retroactively fix the situation by finding her a job the next day.
It's wild to think about the internal panic at that company. Some manager probably thought they were doing a great thing, scrambling behind the scenes to save her job, and they just missed the buzzer by a few hours.
Yep, and worse, they failed to apply to the Fair Work Commission to formally reduce the redundancy entitlement. They just assumed they could manage it internally after the fact by withholding the cash.
Which you can't do.
No. The law demands procedural perfection from employers. If you set a termination date, you are bound by the obligations of that date.
So, synthesizing these two wildly different cases, what is the toolkit here? What should you actually take away from this? Our source material helpfully provides a breakdown of Fair Work redundancy pay FAQs to give us a framework.
Which is really useful.
Yeah. First question, what legally qualifies as suitable alternative employment?
Well, the commission doesn't just guess. They look at objective factors. Is the pay comparable? Is the physical location reasonable to commute to?
Like you don't have to drive 3 hours suddenly.
Right. Does it match the employee's level of seniority, their total hours, and the core nature of their duties? In the Alliance Airlines case, the new job ticked every single one of those boxes, which is why the commission sided with the employer.
Right. And the second question, can an employee refuse suitable alternative employment? The answer is yes, you can refuse it. We aren't forced to work anywhere.
True.
But, as Brett Morley learned the hard way, refusing an objectively suitable role means the Fair Work Commission has a power to look at your redundancy payout and reduce it to zero.
And this raises an incredibly important question about how workers perceive their own leverage in these situations.
What do you mean by leverage?
There is a very common psychological trap where employees think a redundancy situation is a choice between taking a new role or taking a big tax-free bag of cash.
Right, like they get to just pick one from a menu.
Exactly. But it's not a menu. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? It means you have to look at any alternative job offer objectively, not just emotionally.
Take a step back.
Yes. If the employer has dotted their I's and crossed their T's and the job is genuinely comparable, the legal system expects you to take it to mitigate your own job loss.
And if you don't?
If you reject a perfectly good job just because you're angry at the company and want the payout, you might end up with neither the job nor the money.
Ouch. But conversely, the Kalapakti case proves that you don't have to accept sloppy administration.
Exactly. Employers have to play perfectly by the procedural rules too.
Right.
If an employer misses a deadline, even by hours, the worker's right to that payout crystallizes. The power balance shifts entirely based on adherence to the process.
It is a really complex dance.
Yeah.
We are talking about exact timing, exact contract wording, and the rigid mechanics of procedural fairness.
They're very rigid.
The line between walking away with a $0 payout and a $4,000 victory can literally be a single day on a calendar or a standard IP clause that you signed years ago and completely forgot about.
Which is exactly why the AWDR source material stresses that strict time limits apply to Fair Work claims.
Time is of the essence.
Absolutely. Whether you're facing unfair dismissal, a general protections breach, or navigating the murky waters of redundancy seeking rapid strategic guidance is critical.
You can't just wait around.
No, you cannot afford to wait and see how things play out or assume common sense will prevail because the legal clock is always ticking.
It really is. The machinery doesn't wait for anyone. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a thought to mull over, building on what we've discussed today.
Lay it on us.
Think about everything you've created before starting your current job. Your side projects, your customized templates, your unique methodology.
All that stuff you bring with you.
Yeah. If a standard, seemingly harmless contract clause can legally bind your past intellectual property to your current employer, just like we saw in the airline case,
Oh, right.
how much of your own history do you unknowingly sign away on your first day of work?
It's a sobering thought. We focus so much on what we'll owe a company in the future, we completely forget to protect the value of what we've built in the past.
Something to think about the next time you're handed a stack of onboarding paperwork. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden tripwires of employment law. Tomorrow morning, you might want to grab a cup of coffee and read your employment contract just a little bit closer.